Today we travel down along the coast of Maine to the town of Sullivan, where we find not just a ghost story, but potentially one of the oldest ones in Maine or the United States. Episode 9: The Ghost of Nellie Butler. Named after Revolutionary War hero Daniel Sullivan, the town of Sullivan was incorporated in 1789. One of those nice little down east towns you find, with a long history of sawmills, granite quarries, mines, and of course fishing. But today, let's talk about a ghost story that kind of made it famous, at least in these sort of communities.
Hello, welcome back to Stranger Maine. So today I'm here in Sullivan, Maine with the story of Nellie Butler. Fascinating ghost story for a multitude of reasons. I'm here at the historic Gorton Wharf, and I'm down here because I wanted to tell you a tale which is not just Maine's first ghost story in recorded history, but potentially one of the first ghost stories in the United States. So if you're interested, which if you're watching I hope you are, let's get into it and I'll tell you all about it.
The ghost story starts in 1799, when the Blaisdell home, situated in Sullivan by the river, started hearing peculiar knocking noises coming from their cellar. Over the next year or so, those noises got more intense and more frequent, till finally, instead of a knocking noise, they started to hear a voice calling to them from the cellar. This voice claimed to be the spirit of Nellie Butler, the same Nellie Butler that had passed away in childbirth years before. That voice continued to talk to them and started asking for people that Nellie knew in life. People would ask it questions, and that voice knew answers that only Nellie would know. And for a time, that's all it was, a voice calling out. Until one day, the impossible happened.
She appeared as a woman dressed in white. So, okay, it's an older story. What's so important about this? Why does this make any difference? Why are we talking about this? Beyond the fact the story is 220 years old and still persists. Well, the thing about the Nellie Butler ghost story is not just that the Blaisdell family heard them or some visitors heard them in their home. It's that she appeared to a multitude of people. There were literally hundreds of witnesses who claimed to have seen and heard and interacted with the spirit of Nellie Butler. She appeared to show up to preach things like religious gospel. She would talk to people. They would hold almost like seances where people would stand in rows and she would move between them as if she were a living person. And the most interesting story was when she actually led a group of believers on a march to the home of a non-believer to try to convince him. Now, George Butler, her husband, who was alive, had lost Nellie in childbirth. So she and their child did not survive the process. He also visited Nellie in these sessions, and he thought she was real. A very peculiar thing to have your dead wife come back preaching sermons and appearing throughout the town. In August of 1800, more people saw Nellie than any other time. She appeared to crowds, she spoke, she gave stories, and she seemed to know things that only the real Nellie Butler would know. Pretty strange thing, don't you think? So that will lead us to our next part. What was it she was doing there? What was her purpose beyond coming to speak of the word of religion? What else was Nellie up to? Well, I'll tell you about that next. Captain George Butler did come to some of these readings. He even claimed that he could pass his hand through Nellie, while everyone could see her and hear her, even in the daytime. She was still a spirit, and apparently carried no physical form. So Nellie did have a second mission, it seems. She had come back to implore her husband to remarry. And he did. He ended up marrying the daughter of one of the Blaisdells, the owners of the home Nellie's voice and knocking sounds originated from. He ended up marrying Lydia Blaisdell, and there was a ceremony and party as they did in those times, and Nellie actually appeared to the couple not long after their wedding with an unfortunate message. She had told George to care for his new wife as long as he could, because they wouldn't be together very long. Unfortunately, that story doesn't end well. Lydia Blaisdell Butler passed away 4 years later, giving birth to what would have been their first child. And unfortunately, in a sad repeat of history, both mother and child perished in childbirth. Now, Captain George Butler, though, actually lived a pretty decent life. He managed to make it all the way to 54, which to today's standards is not terribly well, but that wasn't bad in early country time of the U.S. So how do we know this story? You would assume, well, it was just an oral story passed along. Strangely enough, it wasn't. It was written down by a passing pastor who was coming through the area. He traveled from town to town, and he recorded the things that were said from Nellie Butler and talked to the witnesses and people who had claimed to see her and hear her. So all in all, a bit of a different ghost story. Not simply a knock in the night or a vision that only a handful claimed to see, but dozens of witnesses could see and hear and interact with a ghost, or so they claimed. After 1800, there's only one other recorded instance of Nellie showing up again to one man who was in a cemetery and claimed he saw her and spoke with her. But after that, she seemingly disappeared, her business done. So what do we learn from this? Well, maybe it's sometimes that seeing is believing. And when something peculiar happens, make a point to write it down. Thank you for watching this episode, and I hope you enjoyed this story.